Welcome back to Chess TV. It's a new week and a new episode. We've got a new story in the chess history for you about a famous Swedish chess puzzle composer, and you'll get to try one of his puzzles in the weekly chess puzzle segment. Albert is tackling a new subject in Machiavelli and me, and Alfred will continue to guide us through as the Slav defense in the opening score. But before we hand over to Albert, here's an update on what's been going on in the world of chess. The Law Academy of Ukraine, Yaroslav the Wise, is organizing the 14th International Chess Tournament Rector Cup from March the 26th to April the 3rd. 10 female players will compete in the round-robin tournament. Top-seeded player is Alexandra Goryachinka, World Under-14 champion and currently the youngest woman grandmaster, fresh with the final norm from the European Individual Championship. The 2012 Asian Nations Chess Cup is scheduled to take place from May the 15th to the 27th in the Shandong province in China. All FIDE-affiliated chess federations in Asia are eligible to participate, and each federation has the right to be represented by a men's team of 4 players and 1 reserve, and by a women's team of 4 players and 1 reserve. Be sure to sign up before March the 31st. The 6th annual Philadelphia Open will take place over the Easter week from April the 4th to the 8th at the upscale luxury Loews Philadelphia Hotel in Philadelphia. The event has a prize fund of $80,000 and 8 sections. If you're looking for something to do this Easter, this is a very good idea. You'll find more information at philadelphiaopen.net. The 13th European Individual Championship is taking place in Plovdiv, Bulgaria right now from March 20th to the 31st. The field has over 300 players, of which 15 are rated over 2,700. During the championship, communications between players is forbidden until the 40th move has been played to eliminate early draw offers. In case of a pre-arranged result, the chief arbiter can decide that the result of the respective game is 0-0. The rules might seem a bit tough, but there is a lot at stake. Besides the title of European champion, there is also a total prize fund of 100,000 euros. The championship started with a few surprises. Second-seeded Shakira Mamedyarov drew with the white pieces against Grandmaster Peter Dranchev, who is over 250 points below him on the ELO scale. And 7 other Grandmasters suffered similar upsets. However, all eyes are on the boards of the 2 younger stars, Italian Grandmaster Fabiano Caruana, 19, and rated 2767 and currently number 6 in the world of live ratings, and Anish Giri of the Netherlands, almost exactly 2 years his junior, rated 2717 and number 27 in the world. We'd like to wish all the players good luck, and especially so to Anish Giri, who we had the pleasure of meeting a couple of times and who is truly an amazing talent. And with that, it's time for Albert. Here we go.
Today I thought we'd talk about mercenaries. Mercenaries, or hired help, fights for your cause as long as you pay. And that, right there, is the biggest problem with them, the payment. There is instant trouble if you pay them too much, too little, too early, or too late. And what if you would stop paying? Well, within a second, you would find yourself standing alone and abandoned in a sea of armed opportunistic opponents, who all wants to crush you and take over what you have. And then there's the question of how much you should pay a mercenary. In peacetime, finding mercenaries is easy. There are lots of people who want to get paid for doing nothing else than wait in anticipation of a potential conflict situation. But in war, when it really counts, people need more incentive than just a bit of money in their pockets. Because, as we all know, you don't have any use of money when you're dead. The real problem with mercenaries, though, is that if you put your trust in the hands of someone who can be bought, you'll never be safe as long as someone else might be willing to pay a higher price. Now, you get real security from having loyal troops without any other agendas, preferably soldiers whose interests are aligned with yours, because then you can be dead certain that they won't cheat or forsake you. After all, a lot is at stake. Another problem with mercenaries that Machiavelli highlights is that there is two types of mercenary commanders, the very capable men and the incompetent men. And no matter which one of these two types you encounter, in one way or another, they will destroy you. If you're dealing with the competent mercenaries, their strive for power will eventually turn them against you. And category 2, the unfit or incompetent ones, well, it's sort of self-explanatory. They won't be really of any help when the situation actually requires proper use of their services. I think there is something deeply uncomfortable with the concept, the idea of buying yourself an army of people willing to exchange the promise to risk their life in the future for some money today. Because if you really think about it, and you're standing there in the end and know that you will die soon, I think you'd be pretty upset with the trade-off. And what kind of person doesn't foresee this? What a terrible fate to have to fight and die for something you do not believe in. I believe that humans are able to accomplish anything really if they're just sufficiently inspired and stubborn. And that is a lesson that chess clearly teaches us, even if the chess lesson may be a bit trivial in comparison with real war where human life is at stake.
In last week's episode, we began analyzing the Slav defense, and we did then have a quick introduction of the opening, and in this week's episode we'll analyze the exchange variation more thoroughly. The exchange variation is achieved after d4, d5, c4, c6, c takes on d5, and c takes on d5. As I said last week, this variation is known mainly for its prearranged draws, this due to the symmetrical character of the variation which follows. Next step in this variation is to develop the knights. White's knight to c3 is not that odd, but black should be more careful before choosing which knight to develop with. Knight to f6 is the more popular move, but if black instead chooses to play knight to c6, white has an interesting possibility to play e4. If black captures on e4, white answers with d5, leading us to a somewhat dangerously looking position for black. Unfortunately, almost nothing is known about this variation, but most likely black will avoid this line by playing knight to f6 instead of capturing on e4. This transposes the variation to a caro-kann after an exchange on d5, followed by knight to f3. White can also try to play e5 instead of exchanging on d5, but after knight to e4 and bishop d3, we have once again reached an uncharted territory. In order to avoid these many variations, black often chooses to play knight to f6 instead of knight to c6. White has now continued his development and does mainly have to choose between bishop to f4 and knight to f3. The only real differences between the two moves is that bishop to f4 is considered just a bit more flexible, but even so, knight to f3 is more common. Now follows black's knight to c6, and after bishop to f4, we have reached the starting point for theory in this line. In our previous episode, I mentioned that black had three choices: bishop to f5, e6, and a6. a6 is the most recent addition to the theory in this line, and the advantages with this move is that it allows the bishop on c8 to develop to g4, a move which has to be played only after white's e3. If black plays bishop to g4 directly, white gets a comfortable position after knight to e5. Because of this, white often tries to postpone his e3 by playing rook to c1 in this position. Even though a6 can seem as a lost move, the pawn on a6 is quite useful. One of the greater advantages with knowing this line is that it can be transposed to from a later exchange on d5 if black plays a6 in the standard lines of the Slav defense. If we return to before a6 and take a look at bishop to f5, we are once again in that symmetrical line, and if white wants to break free from the gloom of an overhanging draw, he should try to play e3, and after black's e6, bishop to b5. White does now threaten to play knight to e5, and more so, to create an awkward pawn on c6 for black, something black defends best against now by playing bishop to knight to d7. White strengthens the pressure on the c6 knight by playing queen to a4, which is followed by black protecting the knight with his rook. White castle kingside, followed by black's a6, a move which leads to an exchange on c6, followed by rook f to c1. White has a small lead in a development, but other than that, the position is equal. Another thing worth mentioning is that White will have a tough time turning his advantage more tangible, but that doesn't mean that the game is doomed to end in a draw. Rather, both sides have brilliant opportunities to fight their opponent on an equal footing. Now we end this week's episode of The Opening School. We'll be back again next week, so see you then.
This week you'll have to solve a really tricky puzzle. It was composed by Adolf Svanberg in 1848 and will really force you to switch on your tactical thinking. Your intuition don't really help you that much in these types of positions. Anyway, White checkmates black in 3 moves. You have 1 minute. Good luck. Well, that was not exactly easy. Let's start by checking which squares around the black king we already are guarding. We can then see that black's only free square is d4, and from there he can flee to e3. When we start to analyze our reasonable variations, we see that knight to c3 check looks quite natural, and because that it forces black to play king d4. We would like to play knight f5 check in order to check and in the same time cover e3 now, but the black rook on f6 prevents our plan. But can we try to remove the rook then? Well, if we play queen d6 check and black captures the queen with the rook, knight f5 is actually a checkmate. But then of course black can instead choose to just run away with the king to e3, and then we don't have a checkmate left in one single move. But the queen d6 idea is actually quite interesting. So how about we start with that move? After queen d6 check, black has no other choice but to capture the queen with his rook, and now it really looks promising for us. After knight c3 check, black has no other choice but to go to d4 with the king. Black can't go to e6 because of our knight on g7, and he can't go to e5 due to our f4 pawn, and c5 and c4 are guarded by our king. So, after king d4, we play our third and checkmating move, knight to f5 checkmate. Well, composed chess puzzles like this one sometimes seems fairly easy to solve by analyzing move after move, just like a computer does. And even if you have to gamble a lot, you do have a certain intuition and also another advantage that a computer lacks, namely that you can use the knowledge you gain from the already analyzed variations to increase your understanding of the position, despite the fact that you might have analyzed the wrong variation. Well, anyway, now it's time for some chess history with Professor Arne Johansson, and today's theme is the father and son Svanberg in Swedish chess. So this chess puzzle, composed by the son's son Svanberg, was a bit of an intro to this week's chess historical episode, so enjoy everyone!
Last week I started to tell the story about father and son Svanberg, who both were professors in Uppsala. The father, Jöns Svanberg, born in 1771 and deceased 80 years later, is associated with the first documented Swedish chess game. He was married to Margareta Elisabeth Markel, and in 1806 their son Adolf was born. There is very little in the form of documented hard facts about the early Swedish chess profiles, so I thought I would try to dig a little deeper than the anecdotic material given in Robert Sahlberg's article about early chess in Stockholm. Since both father and son Svanberg were professors and members of the Royal Academy of Sciences, I made a visit to the archives of the Academy of Sciences and found some material and information that the main archive material after Jöns Svanberg is located at the University Library in Uppsala. A visit there indeed revealed a lot of material, but not much that had anything to do with chess. I wondered if it would be possible to find anything that could confirm Jöns Svanberg's interest in chess. His teaching at the university was at a high intellectual level, but considered to be dry. His son Adolf, on the other hand, was famous for his lively lectures with various types of experiments in the classroom. Jöns Svanberg left a large number of notebooks with astronomical observations and calculations of various kinds. In one of them I found this page with a description of experiments for the determination of the density of air. But if you look more closely at the page, one can discern the pattern of a chessboard on the next page. If we turn the page, we can see this. Indeed, among the scientific notes, he has included these pages with solutions to the classical knight chess problem. That is, the problem to visit each square once and only once by walking around the board with a chess knight. On the following page we can find a third solution to this problem, alongside with some solar observations indeed. Well, it was at least somewhat of a relief to find something that connects Jöns Svanberg with chess. Let us now turn our attention to Adolf Svanberg. I found some material about him in the archives of the Academy of Sciences. In their series of descriptions of lives of members of the Academy, there is an article about Adolf Svanberg, where it is stated that he was a modest and generous character. The only thing that in that article that concerns chess is a footnote that reads, "Svanberg had an unusually sharp memory by which he could recollect old memories and impressions as though they had just occurred. This capability he used to play blindfold against two players simultaneously, and usually winning both games, even against very qualified opponents." According to Robert Sahlberg's description of the early Stockholm chess life, both Jöns and Adolf Svanberg were supposed to have been honorary members of the Stockholm Chess Club that was formed in 1849, something they shared with Karl, Duke of Skåne, later King Karl XV of Sweden, who often invited the chess players to the Stockholm castle. Adolf Svanberg is considered to be the first Swede to have composed chess problems, at least ones that have been documented, and also had problems published in Deutsche Schachzeitung. A game between Kindblad and Adolf Svanberg from 1849 is also considered to be the origin of the Nordic gambit, which starts with the moves e4, e5, d4, e takes d4 and c3. Well, we end there for today, but we'll return next week with a new theme, so see you then.
Thank you so much for watching. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode and that you'll be back again next week when we've prepared an Easter special for you. So hope to see you then. Bye.